Is there something missing in the let them theory by Mel Robbins? I want to talk about that a little bit because I really agree with her that the let them theory is incredible and that we probably would all be healthier and happier if we could adopt that position. And so not to say that I think it doesn't count or that it's not important, but I do think there's something missing. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Rochelle Walsh, and I've been a complex trauma therapist for many years, and now I have an online coaching program, Joyful and Present. So I want to talk about this let them theory. Has anybody else ever found that what seems simple in theory is actually quite difficult in application? So the let them theory about, letting people be who they are unapologetically, then being ourselves, is wonderful. And in essence, it's about, setting emotional boundaries and focusing on what we can control. But here's the problem with that. Setting boundaries and being able to break these relational patterns is really an expression of what comes from inside. And so has anybody ever had the experience of setting a boundary and saying, I'm not doing that again. I'm not over giving, over sharing. I'm just going to not be the first one to call them back. And you set a boundary that seems reasonable, or you try to refrain from giving someone helpful input only to find that you fall flat on your face, meaning that you set the intention with good intentions, but then as soon as there's any pushback or disappointment from them, the boundary, you cave and you aren't able to maintain the boundary. Has anybody else ever found it difficult to maintain a healthy boundary that really makes sense? If so, let me know in the comments. I know that I sure have, and a lot of the women that I serve. And so I want to talk about why that happens, because being able to let them means that we need to be able to handle what comes up within us when we step out of the normal way that we do relationships. Now, let's understand that attachment is key to our sense of safety. So this is not just about preferences. Attachment has to do with our sense of security within ourselves. If you're older than 30, you definitely have a standard way that you operate within relationships, and it was established early on. So when we try to step out of some of those rules, stop overgiving, stop overcompensating, stop over-controlling things, what can happen is that it sends an alarm in our nervous system, in our brain, in our body. And it's not just that we don't like it, it's that we actually feel unsafe. And when we feel unsafe, it signals danger in the brain. And when that happens, our cortex, our wiser brain, our higher level executive function goes offline. And what takes over is our primitive brain, right? That was wired in attachment. And so your primitive brain is going to take over when you get stressed, and it's going to do what has always been your go-to or what has felt normal for you. And so when we try to establish outside boundaries without first having boosted up our emotional regulation and our sense of safety in our nervous system, oftentimes we're doing it backward. We're having to try much harder than we should. So let me know in the comments, is your approach making changes on the outside, hoping that you'll feel something different? Or are you really working on inside out? Because if we're working inside out, if we work with those internal templates, if we work on safety, if we work on emotional regulation, then healthy self-care, setting healthy boundaries, letting them, being secure in who we are, is going to come a lot more from a place of authenticity rather than a place I'm going to try to set boundaries so that I can gain back my power, and I'm going to let them because it's none of my business. Now, I do agree that those things are very important. Setting boundaries is very important. Allowing other people to be who they are is very important. What I am saying, though, is that when we do so from a place of working on boosting our own internal regulation, emotional regulation, our sense of safety, when we do so from a place of calm nervous system regulation, it's going to be a lot easier. Additionally, for people who, I serve, and everybody has their identity based in some kind of values. A lot of the women who come to me are Christians. And so things like some of the things about just, let them, or not overgiving, or stepping out of a role that we've been in a relationship can feel mean, or it can feel like a lack of empathy, or it can feel like I'm becoming apathetic. And so that actually, drives the distress. So it's not just stepping away from a behavior, it's stepping away from something that feels like part of our identity. So again, my name is Rochelle Walsh. I'd love for you to subscribe if you're interested in hearing more of this information. I have another video on YouTube regarding emotional regulation and what's really important to be able to emotionally regulate so that you can end up letting them in a much easier way here on YouTube. Listen to that. I also have a masterclass where you can find more about my approach for helping women gain lasting calm and from a bottom brain inside out approach. Hope this is helpful.